Hey everybody, this is Giancarlo Alino reporting for Sportskeeda MMA, and I'm happy to be joined by my guest today. You know him; he's a legend in MMA. For a long time, he was a voice of the UFC. Now he's going to be providing the soundtrack for the GFL. He is Mike Goldberg. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good, my friend. How are you? Let's get it over with. Congratulations, you won the gold. Connor McDavid didn't play well the whole game, but he's a great player, and big-time players make big-time plays in big moments. Blah, 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 blah. US won silver. Congratulations. Let's go. See, that wasn't sour loser. That was just, let's get it out of the way, right?
Yeah, that was good. Great hockey moment for Canada.
Great hockey moment.
Or the 51st state, as others like to call them. But
my gosh, as you know, my kids are half Canadian, so I consider it still Canada. I just don't know why my daughter, who was born in Detroit, and my son, who was born in Atlanta, feel like they are Canadian, but they do. And I don't know where I lost them, but I guess mom did a better job.
And Mike, this is exciting time for MMA. Obviously, Bellator being kind of discontinued under the PFL banner is a sour note, but GFL comes along there, new format, new team-based format, and fans got to see the draft, and they saw you being introduced as the play-by-play man. So how did this opportunity present itself?
Giancarlo, I've been talking to Darren Owen, who is, our owner, our president. I've been talking to Darren for about the last 2.5 years about this. And he had come into Phoenix a couple of years ago and was looking at prospective franchise owners. And, 3 degrees of separation. I've known Darren for 25 years. That same time, I'd never met him in person. And when I did, we just hit it off. He's been very kind, very complimenting, and it's very humbling to me to say, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. And these are his words. He's like, Goldie, you're the voice, you're the best, and you're the guy who's going to lead us. And then I kind of sat and watched and waited, and Darren did his thing behind the scenes. And all of a sudden, he's like, you ready to go? I'm like, yes, I'm ready to go. And I'm absolutely thrilled. And what I'm really thrilled about is the buzz that the GFL is getting. There were some people that, were a little bit critical of the way the draft show came off. And I could see we probably should have called it a reveal as you look back on it. That said, my powerful partner for 20 years, Joe Rogan, was talking about it with Brendan Schaub the other day. And if Joe's buying in, then there are a lot of people, a lot of fighters, a lot of fans, a lot of broadcasters, a lot of journalists like yourself that are buying in. And that is what is most exciting. Nobody's going to ever beat the UFC. And I can say that because I played for the UFC, the NFL, UFC. That's it. They own it. But there's a lot of room for a second strong organization. And the PFL is faded. They really dropped the ball with Bellator, which breaks my heart because of all the time I spent at Bellator and all the great fighters that were involved in Bellator. But now 85% of them are with us, and I get to see them again, and it's like peaches and herb. It's like we're reunited.
And also, you mentioned there about the draft and the reveal. A lot of fighters, veteran fighters, some that were retired, coming out of retirement. So fans, naturally, they go on and say, okay, like, is this going to be safe for these fighters to come back? Like, what is your initial thoughts on it? Because from what I've seen of the matchmaking so far, it's not like they're being matched up against some 20-year-old up-and-comer. They're being matched up against each other. So what do you think of just the veterans coming out of retirement?
Well, there's a couple of thoughts, Giancarlo. The first is veterans like that who have fought so many times for so many years and left everything in the octagon, in the Bellator cage, wherever it was. What did they need more than anything, physically and mentally? They needed a break. So in a way in which, they left because they couldn't do this or that anymore. They were hurt. They were constantly injured. We were worried about, the mental part of it. They've had the time to solve all that. And I think that's the real key, is they've had the time to solve all that. And in solving it, they've been able to, I would say, get better. Both physically and mentally, they've been able to get better. And with that, they're revived, they're injury-free, their head is clear, and now they can put on great fights. And as I look right now, I'm just going to look over at my screen. Weidman Rockhold 2, Romero Shogun, Verdum Mir, Faber Barao 3, Uriah Hall and Douglas Lima. Tell me any real MMA fan who does not want to see that group of fighters fight each other again or in the GFL. Any fan would be lying. I don't care if they're 100 years old. To have those matchups and to have them go head to head again, it's the fights that we thought we would never see again. Now we are seeing them, and I take it one step further. The fights the fans want to see. That's always been what everybody's talked about. Now, the UFC is the UFC, but at times, if Kayla Harrison was somewhere else, or Chris Cyborg, they really couldn't give the fans the true fights that everybody wanted to see, because one was signed here, one was signed there. Now Darren Owen and our group at GFL, we're getting them signed in the same organization, and we're going to try to provide those fights every single show. So I'm very excited about that as well.
And even on the broadcast there, like, you see some of the fighters. It's also telling of how well beloved you are there amongst the MMA community, because you see like Chris Weidman, Ray Longo, Tony Ferguson, like when they all speak to you, like what was that like, just catching up with everybody again?
You know, people always talk about like Hall of Fame and stuff like that, and you know, the jacket and everything. That'd be great. I know where my career has been. I'm excited about another chapter with mixed martial arts, Giancarlo, but to me, you get a Hall of Fame of life. And for me, the Hall of Fame of life is exactly what you were nice enough to refer to, is that those friendships, that respect, that fun, that we've been on this path before attitude existed throughout the whole draft. If it's Weidman making fun of me again, like, Goldie, okay, I'm not gonna give you shit anymore. I miss your voice, dude. I'll see you later. And Ray Goldie, or me talking to Lyoto Machida about Ghana or whatever, the energy thing he gave me in Brazil. It was such a special moment to reunite with all of those people in one night. It's only gonna be that much better when we do it for real. And it just tells me, humbly, it tells me that I did it right. I did it right. I respected the fighters. I want to continue to entertain the fans and be with a family on the production and broadcast and organizational, mode that I love. And a lot of our Bellator crew is going to be back and helping to produce these shows. So it was just like a homecoming walk in seeing everyone again. And it just makes me even more excited to either see them as coaches, general managers, or of course, to see them fight again. And so it was a very humbling moment, and it's really what life's about. And it was a very special night for me to be able to enjoy reminiscing a little bit. Now let's move forward, see what they have left. But that night was very, very special. It really was kind of a dream occasion.
And just speaking on like what some of these fighters have left, one fighter that has gotten a lot of attention from the MMA community just because of what the past UFC fights has been Tony Ferguson. And
yep.
He has come out and said like this is going to be like a reset in the GFL. Like, what did you take away from that conversation with Tony and where he's at mentally as he looks to, get a resurgence in his career right now?
The only thing that I took out of that, and obviously I am, the entire world, anybody who likes MMA, anybody who was a fan of the UFC and continues to be, they know the struggles that Tony has gone through. And those struggles have come because of the way that he fights. He brings everything every single time, and it beat him down, if you will, quote unquote. I feel for Tony, this is the perfect example of what you and I said at the top of the show, and that is time off, rest the body, but also rest the mind, rest the soul, get that mental state reset. All I saw with that interview from Tony is a hungry dude who wants to go out on his shield, but wants to do it his way. And he has all of a sudden been given an opportunity to not end a brilliant career on, what is it, a 10-fight losing streak, whatever it is. It's not Tony Ferguson-like. He couldn't even sit down when we talked to him, as you know, Giancarlo. He could not sit down. He was so excited. So if people want to, have concerns about Tony, I hope they're concerns about his health. They're concerned about his health. God bless you. I am too, and we're all aware of it. But Tony Ferguson knows Tony Ferguson better than anybody. And the opportunity for him to go out on his shield, like I said, in a fashion in which he will be proud of, win or lose, that's what it's all about for me and Tony Ferguson. And like I said, man, he was walking around during that interview, and I was like, holy this dude's gonna fight right now. I hope there's nobody home with them. It got me pumped up. It got me pumped up to get to call another Tony Ferguson fight. Obviously, it's been way too long. And I think he's going to surprise a lot of the fans. Win or lose, he's going to surprise the MMA world where he's at mentally and physically after a little time off.
Great. And looking forward to seeing this GFL there. And just want to transition to another topic. Fans have seen you on the series premiere of Dark Side of the Cage, documenting some stories there. You were involved in some of these episodes that we've seen so far. And one in particular I want to ask you about is the Ultimate Fighter. You were at the UFC at the time when Dana White was open about the struggles. They were in the red, millions and millions of dollars. So what do you remember about that time when you found out, like, did you and Joe find out at the same time that this was going to be something like a reality show the promotion was doing, or did you know, like, along that process what they were planning?
I wasn't as aware that Zuffa was that far in the hole. I do remember on multiple occasions, and it was talked about in the show, I think Big John was talking about it, that they were spending a lot of money on fireworks, and you can only use fireworks once. So they were spending a lot of money on fireworks, and they were tremendous entrances. I mean, the Tito Ortiz entrance shortly after 9/11, with all the pageantry, if you will, and him carrying the American flag, maybe still the most emotional entrance in the history of mixed martial arts, especially for a proud American like myself. But it's giving me chills right now, Giancarlo. But they realized that that money wasn't needed to be spent. And this is before we get to the big hole, but because we didn't want to be the WWE. We wanted to be bigger than we were before, but if you go too far, you become too close to WWE or WWF, whatever it was back then. And so they backed down a little bit. I'm glad I didn't know we were that far in the hole. I'm really glad that when Lorenzo woke up, he told Dana, yeah, let's give this one more shot. I loved The Ultimate Fighter, just like I said in the documentary. I watched it as a fan, and I was very, very pleased that people had an opportunity to see what a fighter was really all about, that it is a hardworking, absolutely elite athlete who has a tough job, but he takes pride in it and he has respect for his opponents, other than maybe leaving, peeing on a bed. But that's just, that's just a lot of fun. That happens in locker rooms everywhere around the world, more than all of us know. Not that there's beds in locker rooms, but you get my point. It was tremendous. And really what going back to what I was talking about with WWE, I always said the formula for our success would be free, and then hooked. And we never had the precursor of the free, get to know Giancarlo, free, get to know Goldie, get to know that they hate each other, get to have a rooting interest in one of us, a love for one of us and a hate for one of us, but yet you press the button. We didn't have that in UFC, and now all of a sudden we did. We were able to go free, and hook them and have the people be ready for the big fights. So not just the Ultimate Fighter itself, but then what came afterwards with the deal with Spike and having those fight nights on Spike, which eventually turned into FS1 shows, big Fox shows. That was the real key to success for the UFC. And 40, 50, 60 million in the hole, sold for 4.2 billion. I think it worked out okay.
Just that night, the Ultimate Fighter 1 finale built up to that point. And as we seen in that episode, like, Ken Shamrock, Rich Franklin is a main event, but nobody even looked at that fight. Like, everyone's looking at Forrest Griffin, Stephan, Bonnar. Do you recall, like, I guess calling the fights different, but as you look back, does it bring back emotions of what you thought, like when you're sitting beside Joe Rogan and that fight's going on in front of you're the cage side, best seat in the house, and Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar leaving it all out there?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was like second by second, this whole idea of mixed martial arts on a global level, inside an octagon, the UFC, 2 men will enter the octagon, only one will leave. Human cockfighting, it all disappeared. it all disappeared, punch by punch by punch. And the sport was validated. Still to this day, you could argue that it's the greatest fight in UFC history because of the importance and the game-changing effect it had on the entire mixed martial arts world, and obviously, you know, primarily on the Ultimate Fighting Championship. I couldn't believe it. I remember looking at Frank Fertitta after and going, two contracts. I don't know if it was my idea. I'm not going to take credit for it, but it did happen and it was worthy of it. And I'll be honest, Giancarlo, and Rich is a Cincinnati boy like me. I don't even remember calling Rich Franklin and Ken Shamrock after that. And that's with love and respect. It was such a crescendo for that show, for that finale to end the way that it did. And all of a sudden to walk out of that building that night and feel like we have arrived, that I kind of forgot about Rich and Ken. And again, Rich is a Cincinnati boy. That's my guy. Ken is the world's most dangerous man. But they stole the show. But I'm pretty sure Rich and Ken would be fine with the fact that they stole the show because they both made a lot of money because of it afterwards and after that fight. So it benefited them in a massive way. And it's probably the only time in UFC history that people were actually leaving before the main event of the evening. And that's kind of what happened. They forgot too, because the Ultimate Fighter fights were just so dynamic. And of course the crescendo was Forrest and Stephan and my good buddy, the American Psycho. Rest in peace, my friend.
And just even on that too, like that fight, the adrenaline rush it had, like, do you think it overshadowed Diego Sanchez's win? Because the way he beat Kenny Florian was so impressive, but do you think his win, being the first ever guy to win the Ultimate Fighter, kind of got overshadowed because of Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar?
1,000%. 1,000%. And I'll tell you why, and I think I mentioned it on Dark Side of the Cage in the documentary. I used to go around and say, you know, Forrest Griffin, the original Ultimate Fighter. And Diego would tease me a lot. I'd be like, Goldie, what are you talking about, dude? I'm like, what? He goes, I beat Kenny before Forrest and Stephan fought. And I'm like, Diego, I'm so sorry. You are the original Ultimate Fighter. He goes, yeah, I am. And we would laugh about it. But the fact of the matter is, knowing Diego as we all do, he was a little bit serious. But yeah, it did overshadow it. Because of how lopsided the fight was. And Kenny was very humble in that defeat that night. And even in the documentary, he talked about it. I always tease Kenny, my friend, that he was a chubby Kenny Florian back then. Those guys fighting at 185. But it happened so fast. And then the fight afterwards was so good that a lot of people did forget about Diego winning. Not first, but on that night, they walked away with the feelings that the main event was the one that really stole the show, where Diego Sanchez deserves the credit for being the first ever Ultimate Fighter. Also, to build up with Kenny and Diego, Kenny's so soft-spoken, he doesn't get into a lot of verbal warfare, where Forrest and Stephan, it was never really verbal warfare about the fight, but it was like, which one of us is the funniest fucking guy in the room? Forrest with half a head of hair. So the build-up from a comedic side of view on that fight was as good as the fight itself, at least from the show. And so there was a bit more of a storyline going into that one as well. But yes, my friend Diego, you are the original Ultimate Fighter.
And what were the meetings like when Dana White informed everybody that Spike TV signed on? They're going to be the official media rights partner, and there's going to be a lot more events ramping up on the schedule.
We were all fired up. And to me, going back to what I mentioned to you before, it was like, okay, we're able to bottle this formula now. And the reason WWE had such great success is they would throw out these guys and they would make them popular and they would make them loved or hated or a little bit of both. And then WrestleMania, boom, hit that pay button and here we go. So it was a big moment. It was a big moment because Spike was basically the first network for men back then. So it seemed like the perfect place to be, and it was. And there were extra shows, and it gave us not only that, but it was the periphery programming that came around it. I mean, FS1, when they came in a little bit later, Giancarlo, you could have just said it was the UFC channel because we had so many countdowns and memories and the death show. Spike didn't have as much of that, but they had enough of it that we were spread across and people began to understand, first and foremost, they're not just street dogs, but more importantly, the personalities of these fighters. And to get on normal TV, if you will, quote unquote, people used to always say, it's not free, you got to pay for cable. I'd be like, that exhibit lock you put in your pocket, bro. I get it, all right? But we all pay for cable, so shut up. But that kidding aside, it was on free TV, and that's where people really fell in love with it. Gave Joe and I a much broader audience and a lot of newbies, where I would throw Joe the same softballs a lot because we had to teach people that didn't know the sport what this sport was all about without trying to insult those who had been fans since day one. So it was a challenge. It was a welcome challenge. And it was, if you did not follow up Stephan and Forrest with that deal on Spike, we wouldn't have seen the real effect. That fight propelled the deal with Spike. Like Kevin K at the end of the show, Dark Side of the Cage, he's like, yeah, we're going to do a broadcast deal. Duh. So it was a great partnership, and I'll always be a fan of Kevin K and everybody at Spike because they were the ones who had the guts to take a chance. There were other big networks that talked about it. There were huge executives that were shot down by their bosses. Some of them on networks that we eventually ended up on. But Spike didn't just dip their toe in the water. They jumped in head first. And I'll forever be thankful, as everyone is in the UFC world, that Spike did dip their toe and then eventually dive into the deep end, because that is what provided the foundation to where the UFC is today. And MMA and Global Fight League, which is going to start soon.
And just even on that too, like the Ultimate Fighter, that formula was successful. In recent years, though, they've been trying to like recapture that magic that they had early on in earlier seasons, and they've tried different formats, and now it looks like they're going to go with a different format with the two coaches, two guys, Daniel Cormier, Chael, Sonnen, and they're not going to be fighting, but they're going to be involved in training the fighters. Do you think that's the right approach, maybe? Like have the veteran come in and pass their knowledge, or do you think it needs that heated rivalry between the two coaches to sell the fight?
Dan Henderson, Michael Bisping. Boom. Rampage and Rashad. Boom. That's what it really needs. And at this point, of course, they're the all-time greats. Randy and Chuck didn't fight after that show. They fought, but that wasn't a precursor like it was when we got into Bisping and Hendo. When we got into Rampage and Rashad. Black on black crime. Don't you be saying that, Rashad? Don't you be like, that was the greatest episode ever. And it was because of those guys. They made that episode special. I believe the climax of the two coaches fighting at the end, when they have teams fighting each other week after week after week, is very special. But which fighters are still going that would also qualify as legendary enough to be coaches? Anytime you see people, sharing their knowledge and passing it on to the next generation, it's amazing. A lot of great fighters turn into great coaches. Some turn into, no disrespect to Mike Brown's spectacular career, but he would be the first to say he's probably a better coach than he was fighter, and he was a hell of a fighter. So it's great to see them pass on the knowledge, but I miss the opportunity to watch the rivalry get built up more, to see the hatred just reach an all-time high, and then all of a sudden you got the H-bomb and you got the WWE slam at the end, or at least the punch at the end from Hendo, and that still will be one of the greatest, fights, not for Michael, and I love Michael, but one of the greatest fights in MMA history. And the reason that it was so cool is because of all of the back and forth that everyone got to see. It wasn't behind the scenes anymore. It was right in front of you every single week. They got to see the hatred built an all-time high. And when that happened, and then when Hendo finished it, it was all over, just like that. So I do miss that. It was very unique in the early days. I don't watch it anymore, but the first half a dozen episodes, 10, 12, I could not take my eyes off the TV because of what we were learning and the conflicts in the entertainment. So yeah, there's always going to be a place, but it's going to be hard to replicate the early days because they're just days that simply can't be replicated, plain and simple.
I agree there. And just a couple final questions here. You're now involved in the bare-knuckle space as well, providing commentary, and that has been getting a lot more popularity too, whether it's a promotion you're with, whether it's BKFC. Do you think now with all these fighters going into it, it's taking that misconception that fans have away from it, and maybe it's putting more respect on the athletes?
No question. And really, I've said many times, because bone on bone is bone on bone. It cuts no more than Kenny Florian's slicing elbow cut Sean Shirk, and then Kenny was bled on for 3 straight rounds. And I remember Kenny telling me afterwards, he goes, Goldie, Shirk was bleeding on top of me so much, like he literally said in his gross, he said, I tasted like iron in my mouth for like 3-4 days. Like, oh. So yeah, it gets bloody, but no more bloody than many mixed martial arts battles have been with the small gloves. But it's mostly with the gloves. It's not so much the hands, it's those sharp elbows or knees. So yeah, it's there. I think MMA took a bullet or two, if you will, for the resurgence of the oldest form of combat sports, and that is bare knuckle boxing. And now we're getting to the right place. And I'm in Denver right now, getting set for fighter interviews in about a half hour. And Giancarlo, on our first show, as you know, you watched it, we made our premiere on Vice TV. And to sign a deal with Vice is absolutely massive. It's almost, go back to the UFC and Spike. So now that we had fighter interviews, we went through everything, we had a great show on Vice, now we've taken off. And it's almost like I said in one of the reality shows, one of the Dark Side of the Cage episodes, when Anheuser-Busch came aboard, I knew we were legit. And now that Vice TV has come aboard and we have a true platform that's literally changing their face to turn into a sports network, it couldn't be a better time. We purchased BKB in the UK. The time is now, and I believe selfishly the organization is ours to take over this sport because of the UK, because of our pool of fighters, and because of this TV deal with Vice. It is definitely a game changer for bare knuckle and a huge game changer for BYB, which, you know, if you're not, you know, it's like Connor said decades ago, I'm not here to take part, I'm here to take over. And that's how we feel.
And I couldn't think of a better name for you than to call this action than you, Goldie, because you have some experience calling bare knuckle brawls. Those were taking place on the ice, helmets optional, and one of those is like one of the most legendary brawls with the Red Wings and Colorado Avalanche. For our viewers that aren't too familiar with that, what can you say about that legendary rivalry that took place in the Stanley Cup playoffs, took place during the regular season, and in a bare knuckle brawl on the ice?
Yeah, it was crazy. And the untold part of the story is, back in that day, we were on pass in Detroit, and Mickey Redmond, with about 5 minutes left in the period, would go downstairs, because he actually, instead of the up down with the headsets and everything we do now, he would actually go into a room and interview the players in between periods downstairs at the Joe, then come back up. Well, that was still when Mick was a smoker, so Mick would always leave a little bit early. I remember the first couple of games of the Red Wings, I'm like, where the did he go? Like, where's Mickey? Oh, he's going down to have a smoke before the interview. He goes down to get set for the interview, has a smoke, and all of a sudden, Larionov and Forsberg collide. Next thing you know, D-Mac is getting his revenge. He absolutely pummels Lemieux. He pulls him right to the spot on the boards where Lemieux had cross-checked Draper from behind and busted Draper's face. The Joe's going crazy, and I'm calling it alone. I'm calling it alone. And I wouldn't mind sharing with Mick, because Mick's a legend. But Mick's downstairs, he's stuck in the staircase, and I got to call that fight alone. And that was just the build-up, the rivalry, and every year on the anniversary, anywhere you look, it's online, it's on, you know, the NHL Network, it's on NHL Radio. They always reminisce about that great fight. And again, you talk about storylines. Lemieux cross-checked Draper from behind. Draper was wired shut, you know, from the neck up for months. Could have ended his career. And Darren McCarty just waited for his moment. And when he got that moment, he took full advantage of it. And it's one of the highlights of calling hockey, one of the greatest moments in my career because of the storyline, not just simply the fight, because of the storyline. So if anybody hasn't seen that, just look up Darren McCarty, Claude Lemieux, and you'll get 900 versions of it. So make sure you do that. It was a special night. It was fight night at the Joe, the first of many, and now, they're home fights at Little Caesars, so it's pretty cool. And how about George Laraque coming out, that one game during the Four Nations? George Laraque comes out.
Yeah. GSP was there.
Yeah, well, that didn't surprise because that's the house that he built with the Canadians. But, we always talk about United Center with Jordan. But they have been at a UFC in Montreal since George. So it was really cool to see George come out. But when George Laraque came out with the dreads and everything, and I'm thinking back to him and Brashear and all the great fights, Gino Ojic, it's like, Probert, Coach, it's like, there's George Laraque. That's one of the baddest ass hockey players of all time. And so it's very timely that you asked me that question because, man, just seeing George brought me back down hockey memory lane in some of the great battles. And then, we had the slap shot start to the first, game between the U.S. and Canada. Matthew, boom. Brady, boom. And I'm just thinking, man, I called so many games that Keith played in. I'm friends with Keith Kachuk, and I just know Daddy was as proud as anybody because his boys played the game and they played it hard. They played with grit, and they were pissed off that somebody they felt disrespected their home country. And, it was like the Hanson brothers all over again. It definitely sent a message.
Goldie, a lot of fans, myself included, want to see you go in the Hall of Fame one day. And you had a Hall of Fame career, in my opinion. And if you were to see the young Mike Goldberg, the one that was, starting up in the industry and maybe even on the sideline reporter for the Chicago Bulls, and he would see you now, the established Mike Goldberg, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Just take it all in. Take it all in. Prepare for, not just myself. I would give it to young broadcasters. And Vail Clement was the game changer in my career. When I moved to ESPN to call NHL games on ESPN, I'm on the freaking network. Bill Clement's my hero. He was a Flyer. I'm an old-time Flyers fan, new-time Sharks fan because of Jumbo. But I wear 16. I've worn 16 my entire life because of Bobby Clark. I did a book report in like third grade, ran into my mom's bedroom, asked her, how do I get diabetes? She said, what? What the hell are you talking about, son? I'm like, Mom, Bobby Clark has diabetes. He's my hero. How do I get diabetes? And so that's a funny story that goes back. Got my teeth knocked out, didn't want to get them fixed. My brother wore 16. My son wears 16. I actually give my son 16 at Men's League. I wear 48 for Hurdle before Thomas Hurdle was traded to Vegas, but still, fun must be always. I would just say, prepare for every show like it's the biggest show of your life, and just deliver energy and enthusiasm and show the people that you are having fun. And these are all things that Billy taught me, because regardless of what's going on, other than maybe MMA fans, they don't hang on every word. Somehow MMA fans do, but they hear your voice, they hear the excitement, they hear the enthusiasm. And he comes across the red line, entering the zone, hole over the hole. Like, build that crescendo so people are in their kitchen and they turn to see what's going on the ice or in the UFC. And that's really what I've prided myself on, Giancarlo. And are there things that if I went back, I would do differently? Yeah, maybe, but nothing major. I can guarantee you nothing major because my heart was always in the right place. And my commitment to whoever I'm working for will always be there. And the fans, for so many years on pay-per-view, they're the ones, supporting my family. They were the ones that helped me raise my kids, and I've never discarded any single one of them, and I never will. So I would just say, young guys, study your off. Don't ever be unprepared, and have fun once you do it. Energy and enthusiasm, and the people will appreciate the hard work that you put in.
Great advice there. And before we wrap up and let you go, how can our viewers here at Sportskeeda MMA stay up to date with everything you're doing and follow you on social media?
I'm at Goldie on TV, both X and now it's government run, I suppose, if it wasn't before. Both X and Instagram, I'm at Goldie on TV. And, obviously, BYB, check out BYB. Obviously, check out GFL because our social team's doing a great thing there. But I'm Goldie on TV, which, you know, obviously makes a lot of sense. And I'm just really excited for the GFL to get started. I'm excited about the news and the deal with Vice for BYB. And, you know, I've been blessed to have an amazing career, Giancarlo, but the start of 2025 seems like the start of what? I'm not even going to say should be. I'm going to say will be one of the greatest years of my broadcast career. And it's only going to be the foundation to have the next decade, or as long as I keep doing this, to be as special as some of the earlier decades. And I'm just humbled and blessed to be able to say that. Now I just want to do my part to make it a reality.
I recommend that follow. And Mike, I really appreciate you sharing your time and coming on here. And I wish you all the best. Looking forward to seeing you again in the GFL.
Thank you very much. And it's always a pleasure to visit with you, obviously, Giancarlo. And while I am wearing a silver medal because of the Four Nations, the GFL logo is gold. So I'm going to go with that moving forward. Game over. Congratulations, Connor, blah, blah, blah. No, I have huge respect. I'm a huge lover of the game of hockey, and that was incredible hockey. So much love to you, my friend. Stay in touch, as I know you will, and continued success.